All right. Well, thank you so much, everyone, for joining us for National Blind Sports Month. Each week this month, we are hosting different programming. We have social media takeovers from some of our athletes, webinars with different community members, and then articles that are being released each Thursday that share people's experiences navigating different active spaces within our community. This week's topic is community connections, and I'm so excited to be joined with three incredible members of our community who actually represent quite a span of different organizations and are also across the country. So I'll let you guys introduce yourselves. Maria, if you could start us off.
Hi, I'm Maria Lepore-Stevens. I'm a professor of adapted physical education at Rowan University in South Jersey, and I'm the director of several camp abilities sports camps for youth with visual impairments across the country. Particularly, I run programs in South Jersey, Delaware, Pennsylvania, and Arizona.
And I am Josh Lucas. I'm the programs manager at Angel City Sports, which is a nonprofit located in Los Angeles. We serve primarily all of Southern California. We host an annual event called the Angel City Games. It is one of the biggest adapted sports competitions and events in the country, which we pull from all over. I think the most we've ever pulled from is 40 different states back in 2019. So it's a very, very large event. It's really cool, but primarily serving on the West Coast, but every type of disability, including athletes who are blind or visually impaired.
My name is Kirsten French, and I'm the programs manager of the Camp Spark and Sports Adaptations programs of the Northwest Association for Blind Athletes. Our mission is to provide life-changing opportunities through sports and physical activity for individuals who are blind or visually impaired. We do this through in-person programming in Oregon, Washington, Idaho, and Montana, and through virtual programming, both nationally and internationally. We work with athletes and individuals of all ability levels who are blind and visually impaired across the entire lifespan, using sports and physical activity as a catalyst for greater independence and quality of life.
Oh, you're on mute, Mary. Bye. There you go.
Gosh. Well, thank you all so much for joining us. I'm really excited to have such a diverse group on here and to hear everyone's different experiences and perspectives. Kirsten, I'm really interested from you. Can you tell a little bit about how you actually got involved in the blind sports community and how you came to be working for NWABA?
Yes, so this is my 8th year with the Northwest Association for Blind Athletes. During my graduate program, I was at Slippery Rock University in the adapted physical activity program. There we had a blind sports emphasis, and one of the professors had a big focus on that. There I fell in love with working in the blind sports community, and in the spring came out to the Pacific Northwest to play in a goalball tournament. It was not an area that I had thought that I wanted to live, but as soon as I came out here, I realized this is an area that I'd love to live in. And also, thankfully, NWABA, who was helping to put on the tournament, also had a position available at that time, and found myself moving out here a few months later. It's been really cool to see this program grow and to be a part of that growth over the past 8 years.
Yeah, I'm sure your organization has really expanded and grown. I feel like every time I talk to you, you're talking about new programming and expanding to new areas. It's really incredible to see for that region. And you, I've heard before, have kind of an interesting and unique journey within your own vision. Can you tell a little bit about that and how that sort of shapes your experience when it comes to programming for this community?
Yes, so when I came out here 8 years ago, and when I got into this field, I was fully sighted and didn't know that I had a visual impairment. 3 years ago, I started to lose my vision and lost it very suddenly about 2.5 years ago. It was fortunate to already be in this community because my experiences looked very different than a lot of adults who go blind later in life. That so oftentimes we hear this aspect of, you can't do this, you can't do this, you can't do this. And that's what I was hearing as well. But I knew that that wasn't true because of all of the athletes that I worked with who had heard that same thing, but instead said, that's not true. And even in our own organization, we were saying, no, that's not true. these are things that you can do. I was already connected with the community and connected with people that I can look up to as mentors. That has strengthened my experience over the last couple of years to make me even more passionate about sports and physical activity and accessing it now, not just as a professional, but also from a personal standpoint, to then be able to be even more involved in this community, because sports and physical activity has been so important in my own life as a sighted person, but now as someone who is blind, of it being like, this is what has made that connection so strong for me and has been so helpful in my own journey in vision loss.
Yeah, what a unique asset and resource to have during that transition. I'm so glad to hear that that was so incredibly beneficial to you and that experience. Maria, you have also kind of a unique transition within the blind sports community. You started within the community pretty young, from what I've heard from you. Can you tell a little bit about how you got involved and what that looked like?
Yeah, absolutely. So my mom was also in the adapted PE field, Monica Lepore, and then her colleague Lauren Lieberman started the original Camp Abilities in Brockport, New York in 1996. And at that time, I was a young kid. I was like 6, 7 years old. So what's a mom to do when her young kid is with her for the summer, but bring her to camp? So I grew up going to Camp Abilities as a sighted kid, which I think gave me a really unique perspective when I was young about blind sport, because I never had the perspective that kids with visual impairments couldn't play sport. That was part of my life. Part of my life growing up was being friends with kids who are blind and learning how to make not only sport, but also my whole leisure time accessible for hanging out with my friends that had visual impairments. So I think that that's really impacted my friendships now, because a lot of my friends remain people with visual impairments and athletes with visual impairments to this day. But also my perspective on how to adapt sport and what can be adapted, because when you're a kid, you want your friends to do everything that you can do. And I still want my friends to do everything that I can do. So I think that that's been really helpful when I'm running camps for kids with visual impairments, because I can rely on what I know has worked, what has worked for my friends, and the sky's really the limit. Like, there's nothing that I see as impossible for us to do at camp, especially if it's something that a kid is interested in doing.
Yeah, from my time working with you, I really saw that in the way that you showed up for the kids and for the community, that there really just seemed to be somewhat of a difference in perspective. You just seem to handle it in like oh yeah, like we'll figure this out. Like, yeah, kind of no limitations, no holds barred, in that approach and in those perspectives. I think that comes across really strongly to the kids that you work with when that's the mentality going in. Yeah, it was really incredible to see you working with the kids at camp.
Thanks. Yeah, and that's one thing that I've also wanted to bring into my work. So most of the camp programs that I run have an inclusive coach and training program. So it's kids with visual impairments that have grown up at camp, as well as kids without visual impairments from the community in this coach and training program together, because then our athletes with visual impairments can be role models because they know what the camp program is, but also are in an environment where everyone's willing to make accommodations to the workplace for them, as long as they ask what those accommodations that they need are. But kids without visual impairments are also learning alongside of their peers. So it's not just a model of kids without visual impairments are the helpers and kids with visual impairments are helped, but together people with and without disabilities are the helpers and also sometimes need help. So I've really tried to incorporate that model to give other kids the experience that I have of growing up in this intentionally diverse environment.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm excited to hear from Josh. You've also worked in this camp setting, and you've worked with a lot of different organizations kind of across the board and across the country. Tell me a little bit about how you got involved in blind sports.
Yeah, it's funny. I'm also a Slippery Rock graduate. So when you go to school in Pennsylvania, when you're a phys ed major, which I am not, but my older brother was a phys ed major, you have to take intro to adapted. And my older brother and I went to the same college. He met a really passionate professor there, Mrs. Wendy Fagan, and she knew he was a sports nut and just said, you got to come see this thing that I do on the weekends. I coach a sport called goalball. And so he went, he was there at practice, and then he came back to the dorms, was like, you got to go see this thing with me next week. So I went and saw goalball being played traditionally, with a bunch of local teenagers with visual impairments. And I initially was just really intrigued because I had always grown up super into competitive sports. If you asked me what I was going to do when I was a kid, I would have told you I was going to the NFL, and that was the only choice for me. So anything seeing it at that level competitively was really the draw for me. But then, I picked up the minor and started taking the courses, and it grew and expanded into not just the competitive Paralympic style sports, but also what can you do recreationally, which led me to an internship at Camp Bloomfield, which is a camp for adults and children with visual impairments in Malibu. It was one of the biggest camps in the country. It had been there since 1958. And I got lucky and they had a position. So I took over running the camp in 2013 and did that until, unfortunately, it was lost in the Woolsey fires in 2018. And that's when I transitioned from Wayfinder Family Services over to Angel City Sports, which the biggest difference now is I can continue to do all of my sports that I love with athletes who are blind or visually impaired, but I also get to add back in the other classifications of athletes, amputees, spina bifida, cerebral palsy, spinal cord injury, any type of athlete. So it's almost like a mini Paralympics. But for me, it was completely by chance that I ended up in this field from one passionate person. Our commonality was just the sports, but I had never, prior to going to college, I never really had experience with somebody who's blind or visually impaired or any other type of physical disability. So it all started just, when I was a young man and in a new setting. So that was really neat. It's kind of blossomed into all this.
It's really interesting to hear from all of your perspectives because they come from such different directions, yet land in such a similar place of really seeing these as incredible opportunities for athletes, seeing the impact that they have on people. And also kind of like Kirsten how you had said it, just giving people the opportunity and telling them that they can is so impactful. Josh, within your work now for Angel City, tell me a little bit about what you guys offer and what programming you have for the blind.
So when I came to Angel City Sports, their programming for the blind was actually very limited. Historically, the CEO started our nonprofit because his son was born with a limb difference. So his son had his left leg amputated when he was 2, and he has a limb difference on his left arm. So they primarily were involved in the amputee community, which grew into athletes who use wheelchairs. And that was primarily who they were serving at the first couple Angel City games. And they had a couple athletes who were blind and visually impaired say, this is a great event. What can we do? So they started with track and field. Since I've been on board, we've made a much harder push into really specific sports and offerings for also just that blind and visually impaired classification. So our biggest one right now is blind soccer we do throughout the year, but we also do goalball, blind judo, air rifle, archery, track and field, and swimming. So we do a bunch of other sports that athletes who are blind and visually impaired, it's easily adaptable for. Same with Maria, we'll kind of bounce around and say if they're interested in something, we'll work on coming up with it. But it's easy to provide that regular programming right now. And we do that year round. And then our goal is to have those couple of bigger events so they can have a chance to compete. So again, whether it's a little put together goalball tournament or even if it's a mock game for blind soccer, because for those people who don't know, in the adapted sports community, at least in the sports side, if you want to compete in a sport, and I know you know this, Mary By, is you have to save up money, you have to have time, you have to have chaperones because you have to travel. There's not a league in your backyard to do this stuff. So even if your parents want to get your kiddo involved in sports and they have a visual impairment and they're doing a unique sport, they have to find an organization or a group that can take them places. So we want to add opportunities to that. So the Angel City Games is a great one. We'll be looking to add standalone goalball tournaments in the future, and working with USABA to do more with blind soccer, so that hopefully more people can do local competitions. They won't necessarily have to save up to go all the way across the country just for a chance to compete and play against other kids or adults.
Definitely. I mean, access to those opportunities is huge. And I think it's interesting that Angel City really occupies this interesting space where you do serve kind of the wider adapted sports community. What benefits do you see for the blind and visually impaired athletes when they're kind of integrated in and there is sort of that mix of different people and, different disabilities in one space?
No, that is a great point. I think our ultimate goal at Angel City is to be a mini Paralympics, in that one, the Paralympics are just like the Olympics, where it's the elite of the elite. So most of us will never rise to that level. It's such an accomplishment when somebody can go. So how do we make that more widely available? But the inclusivity part of it is, even, blindness and visual impairment is probably one of the lower incidence disabilities, except for when you get older, it might be more prevalent. But we want to bring those athletes in, because when Team USA goes to Paris next year, all the different types of disabilities are walking in together underneath the flag. And that's what we want to bring and show. Yes, we have different disabilities, and yes, those are unique in challenging ways, but we have that commonality of we're still athletes. We still train. We all just train differently. It's a lot to bring together. So it's really neat seeing that and exposing them to that. For example, this year we brought Coach Smith brought the national team for blind soccer to the Angel City Games. And even people that have been coming to the Angel City Games for years, if it was a wheelie athlete, some of them are like, I've never seen any of these sports for the blind. So exposing them to it too, and seeing it and them trying it. We've had kiddos who are amputees play goalball and do all these different things. So it's just that cross, that peer support and stuff that's really neat to bring them all together now and do that.
Yeah, there's like a really interesting experience that comes from seeing those different perspectives and kind of understanding different people's disabilities outside of your own.
Yeah.
Kirsten, you within your organization focus primarily within the blind community. Can you tell me a little bit about some of the different programs you offer? I know that they're pretty expansive and are only expanding more.
Yes, that's correct. We work with athletes who are blind and visually impaired across the entire lifespan, so birth through all of life. That also is, when we use the word athlete, we mean of all ability levels, whether it's someone who has recently lost their vision and wants to get back to being outdoors, doing a little bit of hiking, all the way to someone who is at a Paralympic level, training at that level, or is a Paralympic athlete and wants to continue being physically active outside of that lifestyle. And that's allowing everyone to have that access that they need. We do a variety of different programs through our 4 core programs, including our virtual programs, allowing all athletes to have an opportunity to have a fully accessible audio described virtual workout every day. And whether that's through dance aerobics, balance and control, a Pilates style workout, a circuit style workout, and also an opportunity to develop strong bonds in the communities. Many of the athletes that we work with live in some very rural areas and have very little opportunities to build that community with others who are also blind and visually impaired. And athletes have said, this is an incredible opportunity for me, and this is incredibly important to me to be able to have access to this community, to share things that are going well, share things that are hard, and when this is such a low incidence disability. Through our sports outreach program, we do 15 different sports throughout the year, from goalball, swimming, snowshoeing, downhill cross country skiing and snowboarding, hiking, tandem biking, and more. Our camp programs, we have 7 sessions of camp for athletes ages 8 to 21 throughout the year, including a session specifically for students who have a visual impairment and a secondary impairment. For many of these campers, this is their first opportunity to be able to come to camp. When students and campers come to camp, it's an opportunity for them to grow, to develop a strong community with their peers, to feel connected, to feel supported, and then also to start to see themselves as a leader. This was our 8th year of camp this past year. And in that, we have now started to have campers come back as counselors in training and also counselors. And campers can say, this is someone who I really look up to. I want to be in that role next year. I want to be in that role in the future. And it's been really cool to see that. And finally, through our sports adaptations library, we work with schools and coaches to ensure that youth with visual impairments have access to PE, physical activity, and their interscholastic sports in the same way as their sighted peers, whether that is through equipment, adaptations, how do we make that sport accessible, and professional development opportunities for those teachers and coaches to ensure that all students with visual impairments have the same access as their sighted peers and the same access that they have the right to.
Wow. I've heard a lot from you about the experiences and the different programs you offer, but hearing it in such an expansive way, you guys really do an incredible job of covering that entire scope and really considering people for all the things they may be interested in within physical activity. I've always really seen the Northwest Association for Blind Athletes as one of those leaders within the blind community. What really sets the organization apart as far as how you've been able to reach so many people?
Something that's really unique about the Northwest Association for Blind Athletes is our growth mindset. Since we started in 2007, we have been incredibly intentional to say, how do we need to grow? How do we need to change? Getting feedback from the athletes that we work with, ensuring that the voices of those that we work with are magnified, are included, because we can't just say, hey, this is what we do, but we don't know that the individuals who are athletes, is this what is needed? Is this what is best? Is this what is working best in the community? And ensuring that that feedback is integrated into all that we do. Working with community partners on how can we better serve their needs, that the community partners, including teachers of the visually impaired, orientation mobility specialists, other parents and coaches and other community service providers, they may see the athletes that we work with on a more daily basis. What are they seeing and how can we be a better resource? And ensuring that all that we do is aimed at that growth and is aimed at serving the athletes best.
Absolutely. It really seems like that community buy-in, that community support, and really understanding the athletes seems really important to that experience. Maria, one thing I know that Camp Abilities has done an incredible job at is really incorporating things from the university side and from adapted PE. Tell me a little bit about Camp Abilities and what all you offer across the country.
Yeah. So Camp Abilities is an educational sports camp for youth with visual impairments. It's a network of camps throughout the world. We mostly focus on US sites, but there are several sites in other countries as well that are all independently run by people who believe that kids with visual impairment should have a right to physical activity and sport that's adapted for them. All the programs that I run also have a focus of general health and wellness in addition to sport and physical activity. I'm a health and physical educator, so I think that that health component is also really important to being a well-rounded athlete. Nutrition education, first aid education, mental health and wellness as well. So each camp kind of has its own flavor. The original camp was started in Brockport, New York, and it's really known for just its size. There are so many kids there and so many people there, and people come from all over the world to learn from that particular program. The secondary goal of Camp Abilities is to train pre-service educators and therapists and O&M instructors on how to be better teachers and allies for kids with visual impairments, and also how to incorporate sport and physical activity into your teaching practice, regardless of what you are teaching. So most capabilities programs are on university campuses and have close relationships with those universities. Some programs are not. One of the programs that I run is in Tucson, Arizona, and it's on the campus of the School for the Deaf and Blind, but we still rely heavily on local universities as well as universities that us as staff work at. Like I said, each camp has its own unique flavor and offered its own range of programming. My program in Delaware, we started at a state park, so we taught activities that could be done at a state park, disc golf using the disc golf course, cross country running, golf. And even though we are now on a university campus, we still do a lot of those same activities. There is a trail through the woods that actually takes you to a local community pool, so we run to the pool every day at camp. We still do golf. At Capabilities Tucson in Arizona, we use a lot of the local facilities in the community. We use the community pools. There's a really strong community pool system in Tucson. We also don't do sports that don't necessarily make sense. Camp is in June in Tucson. It's hot, so we don't run as much, but we do goal ball, and we do strength training when it's too hot to go outside. We started to incorporate horseback riding and archery this year in partnership with a local ranch, because that is very much part of the culture of Tucson. This summer, we're planning to incorporate more like other aspects of culture, like cultural dance, and go back to our ranch this summer. Camp Billy's Pennsylvania is in an area of the country where triathlon is really up and coming. So for about the past 10 years or so, we have focused on triathlon. We still do other sports, beat baseball, goalball, but we end camp with a triathlon where every kid competes at USA Kids distances in a triathlon. So each camp kind of has its own vibe based on where it is and the influences of who's running it. The training staff part is really important as well, because if we can teach future PE teachers that having a kid with a visual impairment in your class isn't hard or scary, and that sitting out or running on the treadmill or being the scorekeeper is not the vibe. Like, that's not the option for your kids with visual impairments. They should be participating and playing and active. Then we can impact more kids than are able to come to camp. So that part is also really important. And as I mentioned before, my camp in Delaware and the new camp that I'm running in New Jersey, as well as we're starting in Tucson as well, to have the inclusive CIT program, because I, as a teacher, can't be everywhere my students are, but their peers can. So sometimes it's really hard to advocate for yourself when you're the only kid who's blind in a school. But if you also have a friend there, or an older sibling, or just someone else at your school who's been to camp before and can say, like, oh, you know what? I learned when I was a CIT how to be a guide runner. So like, this actually isn't a big deal. I can just guide my friend in PE class. And that's just another ally and advocate. So that training piece is also really important to the capabilities model. Because we incorporate that training of staff piece, we have really low staff to athlete ratios. So we operate predominantly on a 1-to-1 ratio to give kids a personal trainer, someone who can give specific feedback. And not all of our athletes that come to camp need that because of their vision, but it's also like a confidence booster and a self-esteem booster to have someone who's focusing on you and really helping you to perfect your form and give you feedback, so that you have that information when you go back to try to do those activities on your own.
I love what you said about the confidence piece, because it really, those settings are incredible to teach kids these skills. But then what is more incredible is what they can do at that next, is being able to be advocates for themselves, to know what their needs are, to make it clear to other people that it's not a big deal and we can figure this out together. I know that within your professional career, you are very involved within the same community, and actually teaching people to be adapted PE instructors. So tell me a little bit about how your experience at Capabilities has influenced your teaching methods and some of the examples that you share, and also vice versa, how what you teach kind of also impacts how you show up at Capabilities.
Yeah, so I didn't think that I was going to be a health and PE teacher. That wasn't my plan. When I also attended a Pennsylvania university. I went to Westchester University, and I was going in to be a math teacher. And I just so happened to learn Braille at Camp Abilities. I was spending time with a lot of the teachers of the visually impaired at camp, particularly at the Camp Abilities that was in Alaska at the time. And I was really interested in Braille, and I learned. So when I went to another Camp Abilities program in Florida, one of the teachers of the visually impaired there noticed that I, as an early college student, knew Braille and could read it visually, and suggested that I think about teaching kids who are blind. And that had never been on my radar. And as I looked into it more and talked to more teachers of the visually impaired and O&M instructors, I realized that O&M was what I really wanted to do. And that I did not need a degree in math to do that. So I had already been involved in the adapted PE program at Westchester University because my mom was a professor in the program. And it made a very easy switch to change to my major to health and physical education. So going to camp directly got me into being a health and PE teacher. And then I went on to school at the University of Arizona, where I did my degree in O&M, again, really enhancing what I could bring to the camp program and realizing that sometimes coming at it from a strictly health and PE perspective without incorporating that O&M knowledge wasn't going to create the best program. And having that O&M knowledge really helped me to tailor some of the activities and the way I was teaching, particularly the college students, to support kids with visual impairments. So I've taught O&M and health and PE, and then I kind of fell into this job at the university level because I found, again, that I was hearing from my students at camp over and over and over that they just weren't being given opportunities. And as an O&M instructor doing direct service, I could maybe support 20 kids a year. But if I was teaching their teachers, then I would be able to ensure that those teachers had the skills and knowledge to support every student with a visual impairment and every student with a disability through their whole career. So I have been teaching at Rowan for 4 years now. One of the biggest things I've done is to change our field experience to hands-on teaching of kids with disabilities, bringing in a Camp Abilities program at Rowan University to provide hands-on experience for my students, but also to bring Camp Abilities to the local community. I think those things are really important. You can't go out and be a teacher if you've never done the things and you've never learned how to teach kids with disabilities in a setting where you're actually meeting kids with disabilities. But I also think that the going to camp part is really important, not just because I love camp, but because I think that working as part of an inclusive staff is so important to understanding the needs of people with disabilities, understanding that it's not non-disabled people help people with disabilities. It's we all work together to accomplish a common goal. And I think that by going to camp and having colleagues and bosses and peers and friends with visual impairments, my students will then learn a different perspective on teaching, and not just I help, kids with disabilities need help. It's we all are working together for this goal.
That was awesome to hear about. I loved hearing about the integration between those two pieces of your experience. And as we're talking about this, we're really considering these different perspectives. You know, you have the kids themselves who learn to be advocates, who learn what they're capable of. And then you have from the teaching side, you know, how to work with kids who have vision impairments. I'll ask this first to Kirsten, but, you know, anyone else can feel free to jump in as well. How can people who are, you know, part of someone's life who has a vision impairment, how can they get involved? So parents or siblings, friends, you know, that can be such an impactful experience to be a little bit closer to what your child is going through, or your friend or your sibling. Yeah, what are some of the best ways that people can get involved in that?
It's a great question because it is so important for community members, people who are in that child or adult's community, to be involved and to be engaged and to be able to get that perspective of why is this important to this person. from finding out what is that person doing. Are they involved in a camp program? Are they involved in a sport? Is there a sport that they want to do and they don't have access to it? Why do they not have access to it? What is something that is important to them? And from our programs at the Northwest Association for Blind Athletes, we always love having siblings, parents, other people who are part of that child or adults community joining us, whether it's as a volunteer in a weekend programming, what that person's coming, that athlete's coming to join us for a tandem bike, and their parent wants to join. Maybe that parent is like, I don't need to be with my child, but I'd love to be with someone else. I'd love to see an adult in this program. I'd love to just chat with another adult who is doing this activity as well. Or it is a sibling who is at an age to be a camp staff, and having them involved, having them engaged. And what we see is as those people of that person's community engage in activities with them, they are able to get that perspective and really see this is important. And even though they're hearing so much from the world of you can't, your child, your family member can't, there's so much that their life's going to look different. But as that parent, that sibling talks to others with a visual impairment, that they're able to say, that isn't true. I'm talking with this adult who, hey, they happen to be working. They do this, they do this. They are in college. They do these activities. They work here. I'm hearing more about their life. I now can share that with my child, with my sibling, and I can really dive into that. Something else that's important, and we always like to remind families of, if there's something that you enjoy doing, whether it's biking or hiking or running or soccer or anything in the world, that can be done by someone with a visual impairment. Everything can be adapted. Sometimes it takes some creativity, but every sport, every physical activity can be adapted. If you don't know how, reach out to us. That's what part of our sports adaptations program, which was one of the programs that I run, is about. Of, hey, we're doing this. How do we adapt that? That it's not, hey, I have a child with a visual impairment, so now we can't do blank. It's, I have a child with a visual impairment, and maybe we do this a little differently, but I enjoy biking. So we got a tandem bike and we go out and we do everything together. I have a child with a visual impairment and my family really likes to run. So we've practiced guide running and now we're competing because we enjoy this, and making sure that we're sharing those experiences with each other on all ends.
Yeah, there are certainly so many ways that, within my experience working with some of these families as well, you really start to see them reshape their perceptions and their perspectives. I definitely agree that can be so impactful to have them close to those experiences, and sometimes having them under eye shades too, to realize some of what their kids may be facing as far as navigating their world and navigating their sports. Maria or Josh, do you have anything to add to that?
Yeah, kind of jumping off what Kirsten said, just having adapted equipment available at home is really important. So, even if you have a really young child with a visual impairment, that's not going to be playing full games with their siblings or peers yet. Just having that equipment around and making it normalized to use the basketball with the bell in it or the soccer ball with the bell in it, so that as a kid becomes interested in what their siblings are doing, that it's available to them. If you're going out to play as a family, stick a sound source behind the bocce ball that you're playing bocce with at your family picnic. Pick the auditory soccer ball to kick around in the backyard. Get a beep baseball to play catch with. Just all of those experiences can be accessible to kids with visual impairments. And I think a lot of family recreation isn't formal recreation. It would be great if families were going out and doing 5Ks and including their siblings and children with visual impairments, and even parents with visual impairments on the weekend. But that's not what most family recreation is. A lot of it is playing catch at the park or playing disc golf or just going for a walk or a casual bike ride. So ensuring that those experiences are accessible. One of the things that has been brought to my attention more recently is we tend to do that more for children than for parents. And that is not fair to the parents that we're leaving out. So again, if someone has a parent that has a visual impairment, if you are a teenager that likes to play soccer and your parent has a visual impairment, see if you guys can get a soccer ball that's auditory so that you can play. Like, that kind of goes both ways as well. Everybody wants to be included. So I think just making sure that equipment is available and readily available, and that's incorporated into what your family does can help include your family members with visual impairments.
Yeah, I think too, what I like most about hearing, Kirsten and Maria talk though is the education piece, because my biggest weakness in my career so far has easily been that I just sometimes forget, or I'm naive. I assume everybody knows about this. Everybody knows that somebody who's blind or visually impaired can do sports and they can do these sports this way. And that's not true. It's actually way different. And even being in such a big city like LA, I've run into O&Ms, teachers of the visually impaired, parents, doctors, even APE teachers, some of them who don't know whether it's an official sport like goalball, or they just don't know some of the common easy adaptations. And yes, a lot of those jobs are so difficult to provide other services for kids who are blind and visually impaired, but it should be much more common knowledge through exposure. We can't also rely on somebody with a disability to always be an advocate for themselves. I think it takes the big broader community of people who are non-disabled like myself to share that and be in those meetings. Whenever we see somebody talking to Congress about people with disabilities, it is someone themselves with a disability, which is great that they can do that. But why is there not more advocates and allies with them to just spread that in a positive way? And then, like all three of our orgs do, is how do you make it fun and memorable? So it's learning to play with your family member, learning about this sport together. But that's not going to stop anytime soon, which is what's crazy and challenging. LA 28 is coming, and everybody knows about the first event that starts with an O, but the second one, the Paralympics, they're way less familiar with. They'll be like, oh, well, I've seen before something about Special Olympics. And even then you're like, well, that's great, but that's a whole different organization and there's nothing wrong with that. But this is completely different. So I just think there's still such a big learning curve that we have to get to, because people also forget, they think about minorities and it tends to go to certain types of minorities, but people with disabilities is the largest minority in the country, and it's not going to go anywhere. So, it's just learning and being more adaptive and inclusive, and learning about, even if you don't know someone personally, taking a second to try and learn about this population.
Yeah, you bring in a really interesting point there with just considering how everyone can really be better advocates for this community and for these experiences. Yeah, Josh, it's funny that you say that though, like we are all very used to this community. And so sometimes, yeah, I forget that too, that people outside of this haven't encountered these experiences, they don't have those perspectives yet. So yeah, it really does take us coming at this from all different angles, working with different groups, and working as extensively as we can with those communities to change that perception within the US.
Yeah. And that's like Blind Sports Month. It takes us sharing it outside of our circle too. So that's why, I love when we do this thing. It's because, again, the four of us could be on here talking all day, and the people that will see this, that we know, or, when it's posted, are going to be all the people that we love and we see at tournaments and we see at camp and we see it wherever. So now it's, okay, let's share it with the other people and make it a point that you tell one person who has no connection to this community, so they're talking about Blind Sports Month. That's got to be the next challenge.
Yeah, absolutely. We'll kind of close things off by, Josh, we'll kind of go back to you here. I'd love to hear about any of the upcoming events or activities you have going on that kids can get involved in. I know you guys are kind of coming to the end of your programming window for this year, but what can people jump in on next year?
Yes. So again, we do year-round programming. Usually it's fairly more traditionally sport-based or fitness-based. We do some recreation, but for any of our kids or adults in Los Angeles who are blind or visually impaired, we were going to have blind soccer to round out this year. And then getting into next year, blind soccer will continue. We're going to have a swimming program, and we're going to be doing a couple bigger events that are, again, great for any level of athlete. That's what I really admire too about the Northwest Association for Blind Athletes. You don't have to know. So it could be your intro, or it could be you want to actually really compete. So we're going to do a kids version of the Angel City Games, hopefully sometime in the spring, so kids can compete and learn with other kids specifically. The Angel City Games happens every summer. We're looking to be back at USC this year, and that's for all ages, so adults or kids. They can come out and learn about a bunch of different sports, and if they want to jump into an official meet or a tournament, they can do that. And then our other big event that we always end the year with is Courage Weekend, where we want to just honor veterans and first responders. So if there's any veterans with a visual impairment, we just want to give them a place that it's a little bit different, the camaraderie they have, the challenges they have, and especially if their disability developed from a similar course of action, being in the military. So those are our three big events. But throughout the rest of the year, if you want to learn about any sport, or again, if you're an athlete who's blind and visually impaired and you want to come check out another sport, might not be classification that is meant for you, but come out. We had a girl this year at the Angel City Games who was blind and visually impaired. She kept asking me, she's like, I really want to get in a wheelchair. She said, I just want to see what it's like. I just want to do that. So she got in a wheelchair and she was dribbling a little bit and doing some wheelchair basketball and just having a good time and get to experience that. She's like, I've never touched a wheelchair before. So it doesn't have to always be for you. We want the whole community to come together. So we'll have a whole year of stuff that people can do.
Awesome. Yeah, I know you guys have quite the lead up to LA 2028 and any involvement there. Maria, for Campabilities, I know you guys have them all over the country. Is there a specific window that those typically fall in? What does that look like for people to get involved?
Yeah, so most of our programming is late May through late August, but a couple of our programs do have programming outside that time period. Campabilities Pennsylvania just had our one-day fall program to celebrate Blind Sport Month. We had it in October. Campabilities New Jersey at Rowan University has a one-day adventure camp coming up in November. Registration is still open for that program. Campabilities Delaware will have a weekend winter program over President's Day weekend in February. Campabilities in Utica, New York, I believe also has a weekend program over their winter break in February as well. And then the first programs to start off in May are usually one of the Georgia programs and Campabilities Pennsylvania that start on Memorial Day weekend. My other program, Campabilities Tucson, will be the first week of June, and then Campabilities Delaware will be in early August. But campabilities.org, there is a site of other camps, and it lists when all the camps are and how to get in contact with the directors, their websites, etc. Most of us are just the name.org, so campabilitiespa.org, campabilitiesdelaware.org, campabilitiestucson.org. Pretty simple, but usually the registrations for the summer programs start in around January or late December, but most of the programs have something going all year round that you can say that you're interested or put in your information. But yeah, some of the camps have fall programs, winter programs. There's stuff going on all the time in at least some states. And if you are interested in blind sport and you don't have a Campabilities in your region, definitely reach out to the closest director. We are all very excited to have you come to our camp and see what it's like so that you can then start your own in your region. Many of us are willing to support you to start camps in the regions near you as well.
Awesome. It sounds like there are lots of different opportunities for people to get involved. Yeah, that's really cool to hear about the programming. That's not just during the summer. I just assumed summer camp, but that's really cool.
Yeah. It kind of depends on the camp program and what they do. Like I know in Utica, they do actual winter sports.
Oh, cool.
In Delaware in February, it's cold and not snowy, so we can't do actual winter sports. But we do have camp in the winter, and then in fall, a lot of our programs that do fall stuff do hiking and football and some more fall sport type things.
Fantastic. Yeah, and we'll make sure to post the link to the website so people can check those out. We'll post that when this video goes live. And Kirsten, for the Northwest Association for Blind Athletes, you have programming all year, and it sounds like you have such a wide range of different opportunities. What are some of those that are upcoming in the next few months?
Yes, we have programming all year and including every day of the week from our virtual programs all throughout the entire work week. We have over 7 workout sessions throughout the week and programming every weekend. Camp registration for all sessions of Camp Spark opens on November 1st. We do sessions of camp throughout the year, starting in January all the way through the end of July is when we wrap up our camp season for the year. As we enter into this fall and winter, we're jumping into our winter sports from downhill skiing and snowboarding, snowshoeing, it's goal ball season, swimming, and then we'll be getting ready for spring before we know it. But if you are in person, please check us out throughout Oregon, Washington, Idaho, and Montana. We're doing in-person programming throughout those states. And if you're virtual, we'd love to have you join us for any of our virtual programs.
Amazing. There are so many cool things taking place around the country. And I just want to say thank you to all three of you for representing your organizations, for sharing your personal experiences today. I think it's so valuable for our community to be able to come together and share these types of resources. So thank you so much for your time. For anyone else who is interested in taking part for the rest of this month, we'll be hosting programming, including our social media takeovers, webinars. We'll have our final webinar next Wednesday. And then people can join us either in person in Colorado Springs or virtually for our Breakfast with Champions celebration on October 27th. And that broadcast will begin at 8 a.m. Mountain Time. We'd love to see everything that everyone is doing across the country, so make sure to tag us in your different posts about your activities, and we will be sure to share links to Angel City Sports, Camp Abilities, and the Northwest Association for Blind Athletes in the comment section of this video. But thank you all so much for tuning in for National Blind Sports Month. Thank you.